Welcome home. We are WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. I have lottery tickets. I just have to get them off my bureau here, my curio. Pac-Man scratch-offs. We'll have these on Friday down at Lexington Market. We're going to be at Fadley's from 2 until 5. The race is Saturday. The Alibi Breakfast is Thursday. The Orioles are home all week. The schedule comes out on Wednesday. I'm worn out from chasing the Northern Lights at Spokane over the weekend. And post-position draws on Monday night. It's almost like old times when I get to welcome this guy back onto the program. Dick Jerardi joins us. He is our defending racing champion. I'm going to let him plug gambling, betting. I learned 2 weeks ago that he is ahead for life because of these syndicates and these big scores and all of that stuff. But we get the race here, and, dude, every time you and I have gotten together for 32 years, it's been about the future of the race, and where the race is going to go. And we gave a lot of oxygen to that 2 weeks ago. But I can't say it enough for people that tune in that we feel like we finally have some level of resolution that we haven't had since, let's to be honest, since Frank DeFrancis died 35 years ago, however long ago it's been. It's always been in flux. And as I welcome you down from Philadelphia here, this is sort of a dawning of a different thing that's going to happen here in the next couple of years, right?
Yeah, no doubt, Nestor. This is going to be Preakness 149. So next year we'll have 150 at the site, and then it sounds to me like that's going to be the last one in the old building. The building is going to come down. They're going to run it at Laurel for a year, and then hopefully the new facility will be up for the 2027 Preakness. If I'm reading everything correctly down there, it sounds like the legislature has done what they needed to do. Governor Moore has signed it, so it sounds like it's all going to happen, and I can't wait to see.
Well, in regard to the future of all of this and where racing is and having a good race here this week and having the Kentucky Derby winner here, like for most of that. And I went to the post draw on Monday night. It was smaller, Stronach didn't roll out $250,000 and buy John Waite to come in and play for the media or Chicago a couple of years ago. And so it's in a little French bistro. The chicken was delicious. Hats off to the Atlas group. I love you, Alex. Feed me chicken. But the race and the buzz around the race and what it's supposed to mean for the community has always been sort of, certainly this century, sort of mired in the future of the race and the uncertainty of the race and all of that. And every time I say anything about horse racing, I get emails from friends of mine who love horses and euthanizing horses and the PETA people. The PETA people are out on Wednesday. I'm doing the crab races. The PETA people want us to use mechanical crabs. So I'm not kidding, Dick. I mean, so this has taken another level, but the industry has taken it on. Where is the industry? Where are we finding it this week for this new Preakness? Because if you helicopter into this, if my dad came back to life, he wouldn't recognize what it is right now.
No, it's very different. Yeah, the buzz is certainly different. I think now that you have some certainty and the fact that the Stronach Group will not be involved in a couple of years, you kind of have a different look about it. And I'll be fascinated to see how the Preakness is promoted in the new Pimlico. When that happens, it'll be absolutely fascinating to see. I can't wait to see it. I'm looking forward to the new building. I've seen drawings. I've seen what people want to do. The industry itself, Nestor, I would say, is in a pretty good spot for the big events. The Derby obviously is bigger than it's ever been. The TV ratings were crazy, highest rating since 1989.
And what a race!
Not sure. Yeah, it was a race for the ages, right? Two noses never happened before in the history of the Derby. So you got all that. And you have some continuity because you have the Derby winner. You got Baffert coming back to the Preakness, which he's won a record 8 times. So you have all that. But yeah, I think it's going to depend on who's running Pimlico. How is the Preakness going to be promoted in this new circumstance? And then I think we'll have a better idea where we're going forward. But I would say the industry as a whole is in a pretty good place. I think the HISA initiative is a good one. Some of the things they've done up till now, I'm not thrilled with, but it takes time. I think to have uniform medication rules around the country is long overdue. I think that'll give some people some certainty about some things. But again, there's a lot of kinks to work out at this stage. And the fact is, despite what you see and hear sometimes, the reality is over the last really 5 years, since 2019 and all the problems in the winter at Santa Anita, The fatalities are down dramatically in horse racing. They've done a lot better job of pre-race exams, of scratching horses shouldn't be there, of maintaining racing surfaces better, all of that stuff. So I think, again, people don't want to hear it because there's a narrative out there, but the reality is all that has gotten dramatically better over the last few years.
Dick Jerardi is our guest. He is a Baltimorean. We were colleagues at the Baltimore News American and Sports First 40 years ago, and he's been in Philadelphia for almost 40 years now, doing horse racing at a very high level, as well as Penn State basketball. I don't leave that out for you and all of your other little hobbies and pursuits, including cheesesteaks at Joe's Steaks. A couple things. You mentioned Baffert, and Bob's coming on the show this week, so I want to talk to you about him. Let's talk about the Stronach people. Stronach, I've never met any of them. Belinda, Frank, the fight that they had years ago, the future of the race, dumping money into Laurel. Are we going to get slots? Why did those people ever get in? Can you give me a little bit of a history lesson about how this thing? I can give you the history lesson on Angelos. I'll give you some future on Rubenstein here soon because I've been here for this. But this whole thing from the DeFrancis thing to this mess that it became, and television and Triple Crown and no governing body, to your point, through all of this. How did it get like this? And why did these Canadian folks ever get involved in this?
Yeah, I mean, Stronach's an interesting character. Obviously, Frank is sort of out of it now. His daughter Belinda is running most of the what they're now calling First Racing, the Stronach Group, which owns, for the people that don't know, owns obviously Pimlico and Laurel in Maryland, owns Santa Anita Park.
First Racing is their name, because I see that. I don't know what that is. That's them trying to clean their name up like Comcast with Xfinity, like that.
I guess they own an ADW called Express Bet. They changed that to First Bet. I mean, I still call it Express Bet. They also own Gulfstream Park in Florida, so they're big players in the sport. But the question is, what do they really want out of the game? I mean, Santa Anita sits on some of the most valuable property on earth. They're about to close Golden Gate Fields, a racetrack in Berkeley across the bay from San Francisco. So are they really a racing company, or are they more of a gambling company? Are they nothing? Neither of the. Are they a real estate company? So it is a little confusing. But look, there's a lot of.
It always felt like it was a debutante party and an EDM get down rave with Belinda Karloff. Right. I call her Belinda Karloff, for crying out loud. Gina Schock will kill me for that. But Belinda Stronach, who is an image on a screen here, not there's been no citizenry about horse racing here, even though all the trainers, all the jockeys, all the horse people, all the equine people, the horses are bred here, but there's been no representation at the top here. And I said since Frank died.
No, I think that's fair. And I also think that, look, Belinda Stronach has this idea of what works in horse racing, and she's a big event person, and that's fine. And she's got two of the bigger events there are in the Preakness and the Pegasus World Cup down at Gulfstream Park. But I think she's catering sometimes to the wrong people. She wants everything to be higher end, and that's kind of where the Preakness has gone. But look, the Preakness is not a high-end event. It's an everyman event.
People's party, right?
Correct. It always has been, and I just think they're going the wrong direction. And they've priced a number of people out of the Preakness. Look, the last couple of years, the crowds have been down dramatically, at least in the part of the track where I am. I don't know about the infield.
Well, Monday night, the buzz is they haven't sold tickets. That's the word. Right. And the word, Dick, and this is the worst thing in the world, they're not trying. Like, I remember you could go to the Crown gasoline station and buy Preakness infield tickets, and people just went and did. Now you can click a button, but you got to want to go. And last year was Bruno Mars. They lost $3.5 million booking Bruno Mars. Like, I'm learning about the business side of this, and I'm like, they just tried to kill the sport here. And every year you and I try to save it, and we get together and we hug each other in May. And I'm feeling like getting with these local people in the last month or two and what happened in Annapolis, that it might be. Dick, I have an appointment about getting my press pass back from the Orioles. So there's even been change there. I'm just saying, it feels like this is a real serious thing that's about to happen here, to do what you and I have been talking about for 25 years, because it was never going to happen with these people, right? Like these folks were never going to
Correct.
ingratiate themselves with Baltimore or understand the race.
Yeah, again, because they own, racetracks and casinos and different things around the country. Pimlico and Laurel were, I don't want to say they were afterthoughts, but they were not first of top of mind. Santa Anita Park is their crown jewel, and they treated it that way. So yeah, I don't know. Again, I don't know who is going to be in charge or how it's going to work exactly, but it's got to be a positive. Hopefully, they get some Maryland people who get it, who understand what this track is, what this race is, and the fact that everything is going to change. I think it's great because everything needs to change, and they still have something. Look, the Preakness is a big deal. When you've run it 148 times, it's a huge deal. It's obviously something the city didn't want to lose, the state didn't want to lose, and they're not going to lose it. It's going to be there forever. And now it just needs to be marketed correctly and sold correctly. And there's a way to do this. Hopefully, the new people will figure that out.
Dick Jerardi's our guest. Who are you here for? I'm going through Jimmy's notes. I want to make sure I'm promoting your who you're betting with, what you're doing, and who you're promoting because you're working hard this week.
So yeah, betonline.ag. I work with Jimmy Shapiro, great guy from South Jersey. He's out in Seattle. He's been there for years. And BetOnline, what they do, Nestor, they have the latest odds and props on the Preakness. It's obviously not all they do, but that's what we're interested in here. And it's so they at the moment they have Muth listed at 6-5, so you can get that number. We'll see what he goes off at on Saturday, and the props will be out shortly. But yeah, betonline.ag is the place for all kinds of wild props. Like there'll probably be a winning margin, a time over under, all kind of cool things that everybody can understand. A lot easier than figuring out if you're going to play a superfecta, right? Props are a lot simpler for people to understand.
Well, my fierceness, I could have bet fierceness for the end of the Kentucky Derby. That being said, Muth is favorited. This is a
Yes.
very unique circumstance where the Kentucky Derby winner will not be the favorite on Saturday, pretty much no matter what, right?
Yeah, no question. It's the first time that will have happened since 2012 when Bodemeister had run second to I'll Have Another in the Derby, but I'll Have Another didn't really have the form coming into the Derby. So I'll Have Another was still the second choice to Bodemeister in the Derby, and then he beat him again. And then, of course, I'll Have Another scratched on the eve of the Belmont, didn't get a chance to run for the Triple Crown. But yeah, the deal is that when these two ran against each other, Muth and Mystic Dan, it wasn't close. Muth won the Arkansas Derby by 6 lengths over Mystic Dan, who was a pretty distant third. Just Steele, who was second in that race, ran terrible in the Derby. He's coming back too. And one of the cool things about this race, so you got Baffert, who holds the record for Preakness wins. He got his 8th last year. You got Lucas with 6. You got Chad Brown with 2, and you got Kenny McPeak, of course, who just won his personal Triple Crown by winning the Derby with 1. So you can add that up. That's 17 Preakness wins among 4 of the trainers that'll be in the race. There's 9 horses in the race.
For the legend of the Derby, and you're much older than me, so I'll let you educate me. You remember Secretariat. You remember hooking whatever you hooked that day to run off the Belmont and do whatever you're doing. For the Preakness and its distance over the last 40 years of falling from the Derby's, platinum, but the Preakness is gold. It's right there, to it being almost the Preakness became, below copper at one point. And there are not going to be a lot of people out there this week. It's not 150,000. Stedman won't be around to bitch about them lying about how many people are out there as he used to do all the time 50 years ago. But the notion that the Derby's the biggest race in the world and everybody wants to be in it, and there's 28 horses that want to run out of 20 stalls, and all the sheiks want to be there, and Tom Brady, everybody wants to put their money in and all that. And then you get a winner, and they have this thing called a Triple Crown that they have tried for 100 years to make a big deal. This 2-week thing is very screwy. That's why Muth is going to be favored, and rested horses come in here, and that's why Baffert kicks everybody's ass, at this race. But this race, I've always thought this as a Baltimore person, like, if that's the beginning and that horse wins and that horse comes here, shouldn't this be moving from wherever platinum is into the next level to say, this is the AFC Championship game, not the playoffs or the wild card on the way to what would be a Super Bowl, which would be Belmont if the horse wins 2 races. And that's happened, enough of the time over the last 30 years. Hell, I went up for Big Brown, Smarty, all of these horses that had a chance to win the Belmont. American Pharoah broke through finally. But the notion from television, the industry, these Stronach people, how it's gotten screwed up that this race got set to sail to be, well, it'll never be what the Derby is or whatever. That was not the idea of this 50 years ago, Dick, right? The idea of this was the crescendo, and I'll meet you in New York, and we're going to have the biggest thing we've ever had in June. And somehow that fell by the wayside with television, the industry. Maybe Spend a Buck not coming here years ago, and all that happened with the industry. But it feels to me that if I own the Preakness, and if and I were promoting the Preakness, I would be making a much bigger deal about it being the next thing that the Derby is, instead of, well, we feel sorry for the people that have to run 2 weeks later and come in that little S-hole of Baltimore. And like, Baffert doesn't feel that way when he comes here. The horse people love this race.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, I think you never get people say anything but nice things about the Preakness. The two most prominent guys in the sport, Bob Baffert and Wayne Lucas, love the Preakness. Of course, Wayne won his first ever Triple Crown race in the famous 1980 Preakness with Codex. And here he is back, if I'm counting this right, 44 years later, trying to win the Preakness again. So, yeah, I mean, they love the Preakness. So here's what I think has happened over time. So Churchill Downs Incorporated is a major corporation, right? Not the most likable people in the world, but they run a really good shop. They're smart. They know what they're doing. They know what they have. And if you look at Churchill Downs from the time I first went there, Nestor, in 1978, to see a firm to what it is now, it's unrecognizable because of
I don't
what they've
recognize it on
done.
TV. When I saw that paddock
Right.
2 weeks ago, I said to my wife,
Right.
we probably have to go
What
back
is that?
there, because I see the football stadium in the distance and the dirt looks the same,
Yeah.
and the spires are
Yeah.
the same, but that's it.
Right. So what they've done little by little, they've had a vision for what this is going to be in the future, right? They've thought down the road. And really it's been over the last 20 years, more so than back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, since 2005, when they redid the whole place. And they actually were doing it exactly 20 years ago during the Smarty Jones Derby. And they built up right where the spires are no longer not even close to the tallest edifice there. And now each year they're building something else. And you know why they're doing that? Because they can afford to do it. Nestor, they're going to pay for that paddock in 7 years. It costs them $200 million. They're going to make like $30 million a year in seating and drinks and food and everything else. So the company, and they're not only into that, they're into the casinos, they're into different things. So the company is flush, where Pimlico was never like that. It was like different management teams. It was, I mean, as good as Frank DeFrancis
Half of
was.
it's condemned, Dick. Like,
I
I went down to Gulfstream 20 years ago, and the NFL threw their media party there on a Tuesday, like
Yep.
maybe 09, 08, 09. My wife came
Right.
down, and we're like, oh my God, these magma people, magma, it was kind of like magma, lava. Like, I didn't even know how to say it. I'm like, these people, man, they're gonna turn West Baltimore into, they got the Preakness. They're gonna want to they own the Preakness. They're going to want it to be bigger than the Derby. That's kind of how I looked at it at that time. And now every time I go down to Fort Lauderdale, it's just a bigger mall. It kind of reminds me a little bit of what I've seen from that paddock in Louisville, where everything's white marble. It looks like the friggin' White House, right?
Sure.
And Gulfstream was Ritchie Highway with a beach, and now it's like the Four Seasons, like literally for 8 blocks.
Yeah, I mean, again, it was funny when I first went down there after they redid Gulfstream Park, and I love the old Gulfstream Park. Nestor, I drove in there on a Sunday morning. I couldn't find the racetrack. It was like hidden behind the parking lots and the casinos and the mall and everything else. It was bizarre. But yeah, they basically downsized. And that's not what's going to happen at Pimlico. They're going to downsize. Obviously, they don't need the building that they had now. And obviously, the condemned part, hopefully they'll tear that down sooner rather than later. But yeah, what happened at Pimlico was just was neglected. While at the same time, Churchill Downs is building up and getting bigger and better than ever, Pimlico, under the present management, did the opposite. And it's really unfortunate because they let a jewel kind of just die on the vine, and they know they need to get out. They are getting out, fortunately, and it'll be a new group in there. And it's just, and that's it. Can it be brought back to what it was when you and I were growing up in the city, when it was such a huge deal? I don't know the answer to that, but what Pimlico and Preakness always had going for them, it was the first place you could see the Derby. It was a huge deal. It was a great marketing event. And the year the Preakness actually blew up, Nestor, in 1973. That's when the infield became a thing. And why was that? Secretariat. He brought people, and if you watch the old films, you can watch them today. Go on YouTube or wherever, watch the 73 Preakness, and you'll see when the horses come into the stretch, all these people are running from the infield and literally right up next to the racetrack. They ran over the turf course onto the track. That's why they put up the fence the next year, so you couldn't do that anymore.
And we
That's
still had
how
a guy
big
punch a horse 15 years later, right?
well, there was that, my man that tried to punch Artax. Yeah, not one of the smarter moves I've seen. But yeah, somehow he got through whatever the security was. But yeah, that's what that and that's when Pimlico and the Preakness were marketed smartly. That's when the Cohens owned the track way back when, and the Preakness was a huge deal. Can it be that again? I think so, done correctly, because horse racing's big events are really, really big. You just got to have somebody who gets behind it, understands it, and you got a great city like Baltimore, which is changing for the better almost everywhere. What's your message? Baltimore positive. It's all there. It's all
I
there.
could
It's
sit here
just
all day and tell you great things that are going on in the
sure,
city, but
absolutely.
the
I brag on
potentiality
sure.
is
No,
what
I brag.
gets us, right? The
Right.
Orioles
Yeah,
have
well,
potential. There's money
yeah,
to build the stadiums. There's
sure.
potential. There's Peninsula
A-
potential. There's the
Absolutely.
Preakness. But then it takes people, smart people, to make smart decisions and have their
Correct.
heart into it, and have local
Yeah.
people, not
I
debutantes from
think
Canada who stroll in here every 51.5 weeks, you know?
right, and look, I think at one point, I think the Stronach Group had the right idea about different things, and then as you mentioned, Belinda and her dad Frank had a fight, and the company it was just kind of a mess. And do I think she wants it to do well? I do. I mean, I think she's got her heart in the right place, but the reality is what's happened, and I think they knew it was time to go. They're going, and I think it's going to be a great thing for Maryland racing, and I think it will improve over time, but it's going to take a little time. What's this going to look like in 2027 when the Preakness comes back to Baltimore with the new, if everything goes according to plan, and nothing ever does, but hopefully it will, and it'll be back in 3 years, and you and I'll be talking about the new Pimlico with the new grandstand and how it's marketed and how it's being sold, and it's all doable. You just got to have the right people doing it.
I will. I'll use the big News American word: reimagined. It needs to be
Yeah,
reimagined through all this.
good
Well,
word.
a great
Yeah.
race here this week, right? I mean, like
Ah,
to your point,
tremendous.
like from a handicapping standpoint, from a pure horse racing
Yep.
standpoint, we got a Derby winner
Yep.
that won't be the favorite. We got a horse coming in. We have all the people who speak like Baffert and Lucas coming in. We have the alibi breakfast. We have the fresh potentiality of the next thing. We have some certainty. But more than that, we're coming off of a legendary Derby race and bringing that horse here under circumstances
Yep.
that, as I saw the names being pulled down at Monarch on Monday night and seeing the
Mhm.
odds being made,
Mhm.
on the site, I'm thinking this is an open race. This is the kind of race you love to talk about.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And look, NBC's got to be thrilled, right? Because everybody's been talking about the Derby because of the finish, right? It's the first nose finish in 150 years. They've had three horse photos, but not nose. And when you got to sit around for 5 minutes trying to figure out who won, although I think it's pretty obvious to the naked eye that Mystic Dan had held on. So you get that. You get those people. Now you have the Derby winner. You have the Arkansas Derby winner who beat the Derby winner in Arkansas. You have the Louisiana Derby winner in Catching Freedom. You have Baffert with two horses. You have Wayne Lucas with two horses. And I will tell you this, you have a great story, a great Maryland, Pennsylvania story, and a horse called Uncle Heavy. Uncle Heavy is a Pennsylvania bred, was bred on Mark Reed's farm and is trained by his brother Butch Reed, both of whom are University of Maryland graduates. Mark Reed was the ACC heavyweight wrestling champion, and his nickname, and he was a longtime trainer. Everybody down there in Maryland knows Mark. His nickname for years has been Heavy, and this horse is named after him. All his nieces and nephews call him Uncle Heavy. Mike Milam owns the horse, a good South Jersey guy, Glenn Bennett. PA guy, New Jersey guy's done really well in business. He's a co-owner of Uncle Heavy. So you got that story. Every horse has a really cool story. And to me, the star of the show has got to be Mystic Dan, right? Your Derby winner. You got Kenny McPeak, who's one of the great marketers, smartest guys in horse racing, very media friendly. In fact, you'll love this. You talked about the Jason Kelsey thing with the podcast, with Secretariat, the steroids, and all that crazy stuff. So Kenny calls me on Sunday, says, "Can you get me on the Kelsey Brothers podcast?" He wants to cross over, which is really smart because that's an audience.
I can get him on that podcast. Could you get him on it?
I'm trying, but can you make it happen?
I can make that happen.
I'm going to text you his number right after, and you're going to make it happen.
I promise you, I have I have the right arm of Jason Kelsey if I need it.
I figured you would.
Not Travis, but Jason.
Yeah, no, Jason's the guy.
I once urinated with Jason Kelsey at the Super Bowl victory party in Minneapolis, and it was the craziest thing, Dick. I'm at a Philadelphia Eagles Super Bowl victory party. Let that marinate as a guy who's from Baltimore that lives in Philly and who rooted for Johnny U on 33rd Street. And so I was a guest at Jim Schwartz and Joe Douglas and the guys that had worked for the Eagles. So I'm there, and it's a big party. It's not just friends and family. There were like a couple thousand people dancing, drunk, Eagles fans, 3 a.m. Men's room, you can't get in the men's room because there's one little men's room and everybody had to pee because everybody had been drinking. And the line's out the door, and all of a sudden everybody cleared the way because Jason Kelsey had to pee. Like, I've never seen 300 men just move to the wall and say, "After you, sir." And he got a standing ovation in the men's room. So, once you have that kind of experience with Jason Kelsey, you have, I can get, but he has to win the race this week, right? Or does he want to come on this week?
Yeah, I think he wants to come on just I don't think he needs to win the race. I think he just wants to be on to talk about horse racing, talk about football. Good. Kenny's a guy that Jason Kelsey and his brother would love. In fact, he actually put on Twitter X or whatever it is these days. He says, "Hey, I'm inviting Jason Kelsey to come down to the Preakness," which he will do. And he said he can bring his brother and his girlfriend, whatever her name is. So he's already having some fun. But yeah, Kenny's you'll meet Kenny this week. He's one of the all-time good guys, not just in horse racing, but in sports in general. He's flying up today. His horse got there Sunday. Mystic Dan's the first horse to get there. But yeah, we need to get Kenny on the Kelsey Brothers podcast.
We got to get Kenny on Baltimore Positives because his horses on the Derby. I'll work on that. You get McPeak on my show, and I'll get him on Kelsey's show. Dick Jerardi is here. He is still gambling. So last thing, Baffert. I have Baffert on later on today. What should I ask Bob Baffert? If you're co-hosting that with me, what are we talking to Bob about?
Well, the obvious question is, what is it about the city that you obviously love so much? Because he never has anything but good things to say about Baltimore. Look, is it part of it? He's won the Preakness 8 times. Yes. His Derby winners have always done exceptionally well in the Preakness. And you know what else, Nestor? Given what's happened at Churchill Downs, right? At the moment, he is still barred. Well, he was never
like
barred
me with the Ravens and the Orioles.
Exactly. So you can relate. He was never barred from Pimlico. No other racetrack barred Bob Baffert. It's only a Churchill thing. They realize he's not a bad guy. He's a good guy. He's not the devil incarnate. He's precisely the opposite. Anybody that actually knows Bob understands that. So I think the fact that nobody, again, the people at Pimlico and Naira had a little bit of an issue at the beginning because of some idiots up there. But yeah, it was a 90-day suspension in Kentucky that kept him from the Preakness in 2022. It wasn't Pimlico. It was just everybody reciprocates when you get a suspension. And that Bob understood that. He got that, but he wasn't barred. He was never barred from Pimlico. So I think that.
Well, it feels like Churchill's trying to scarlet letter him. And as a guy who's been scarlet lettered by billionaires, like I got Bob's back on this because everybody in the industry tells me I should. All the smart people like you tell me this is outrageous. This is punishing guy for an Advil, literally.
Right. And think about this, dude. That's a good analogy. And think about this too. Churchill's the only one that's doing it. So they put a scarlet letter on him and nobody else is looking at the letter. They're going, no. Yeah, I mean, his home track, Santa Anita, never even gave it a consideration. It's just, again, the only reason he wasn't able to run on the Triple Crown 2 years ago is because he was in the middle of a 90-day suspension. And that's a horse racing commission suspension. And that's because the horse tested positive for the betamethasone and was disqualified out of the Derby. It happens that stuff happens. Not that horses get DQ'd out of the Derby, but there are suspensions like that. But yeah, every other track said, no, we're not buying this. It's silly. It always has been, and now it's vindictive, and it just needs to stop. I hope that Churchill will announce at some point that Bob is welcome back for the Derby next year, but I don't know what they're going to do, frankly.
Well, it's clear you said it's vindictive, and that is exactly it is vindictive. That's the exact. You're writers. That's a great word. But more, who is it? Is there a human at Churchill Downs that hates Bob Like, because it always, I can tell you, it's Greg Bader with the Orioles, Chad Steele with the Ravens. You want answers, go ask them. It's not about Mr. Big or it's one person. And I'm wondering with the Baffert thing, like, how are they getting away with this, keeping the biggest star in the sport away and saying, F you, we're the Derby, we don't need you? And I'm thinking, he's one of the few people that talks. The horses don't talk. They need Bob Baffert in this industry. Yeah, well, in the same way that when Brady was cheating and taking air out of footballs, they didn't want to embarrass him, much to their, like later on, I look at it and think it's dirty. But you don't want to embarrass your star, usually.
Well, Churchill is the only entity in the sport that could get away with that because the Derby supersedes everything. That's just the reality. Look, they had the biggest ratings in history. They had 150. They had this giant crowd. The Derby is not going to be overshadowed by Bob Baffert not being there. I know people wrote columns that he should be there, and of course I agree with that. But they can get away with that because the event is the event. But it's still vindictive. It's still stupid. I don't know who that person is. The CEO is a guy named Bill Carstargen, if I'm saying his name correctly. He actually said to Mike Tirico, look, if the Bob has no more problems, he'll be welcome back. If there's no more positives, well, there were no more problems. There were no more positives, and then he wasn't welcome back. And they're basically saying, because he hasn't ever admitted that he did anything wrong, we can't let him back, which is absurd. I think I made the analogy with you a couple of weeks ago. It would be like somebody who has been convicted of something, and then they serve their sentence, and then you go, well, you know what? You haven't said you're sorry, so you got to keep serving your sentence. That's not how it works. You get to say I'm innocent. Once you keep saying that forever. And look, the reality is what happened was there was an overage of a therapeutic medication, anti-inflammatory, that is legal to train with, but is no longer legal to have in a horse's system on race day. It was a mess up. Turned out it was an ointment that had this betamethasone in it. It wasn't an injection. It wasn't something to help the horse run faster or performance enhance. It was none of that. So yeah, this should have been over a long time ago, but unfortunately it's not.
Well, we'll be talking about it all week, and we have the Preakness in town this week. Dick Jerardi is here. Tell everybody who you're here for and how to bet on the race, and give me a little quick handicapping so we can take care of your sponsors and make sure that, this is a hard race, man, this week, because I'm betting against smart people like you this week. So when I saw the odds pop out on Monday at the post draw, I'm like, this is an interesting betting race, right?
It is, and I think one of the things that stands out, Nestor, is how little early speed there is in the race. So it will not help the real deep closers, where it very, very much helped the deep closers in the Derby. So I think Muth will be out there. I suspect that Baffert's other horse, Imagination, is going to be in the vicinity. Then it's just a question of does anybody else want to try to go to the top. And I just was watching Muth's races before I came on with you, his last couple, and he has yet to run a giant speed figure, but you can see in watching it, it's coming. And I think it's probably going to come Saturday, the way he finishes. And I've watched all his works between the Arkansas Derby, which was at the end of March, and now, and it looks like every good Bob horse that wins big races around the country. And Imagination is a pretty good horse too. It was ridden by the great legendary Italian jockey, Frankie Dettori, trying to win his first ever American Classic after winning every big race in England and France and everywhere else over and over again. So yeah, Bob's got himself a really good entry. So yeah, I like Muth. You're going to get a terrible price on him, but I do think he's the most likely winner. And betonline.ag, Jimmy Shapiro, who I'm working for, get on their latest Preakness odds, all kinds of cool props, and you'll see stuff changing, but right up until race day. So yeah, betonline.ag, must go on there and check it out.
I was promised by David Joseph of the Gulfstream Pimlico people that not only will I have a press credential, that I will not be thrown out and demanded to be escorted out of the press box after 40
Very
years
nice.
this year. So I will have access to you.
Okay.
So I can
All
come
right.
up. I
Yeah.
walk all 6 stories up because I'm in decent
Yeah.
shape right now, and it helps me up that little
Yeah.
that back hallway there. And then I'm going to come and give you a hug, and we'll take a Preakness Day picture for old time's
We
sake. How
could
about that?
100%. Yeah. Text me day of, and I'll make sure I'm gonna be down. I'm not probably not gonna be there till early afternoon. I'm actually doing a radio show up in Philly in the morning, and then I'm gonna drive down. But I will be there in plenty of time for
I
all the
will
big
be there
races.
to see you. Dick Jerardi is here. Follow him. Tell everybody about your sponsor again. Get me out to AG. Go ahead. Tell me where it is.
Yeah. Yeah. BetOnline.ag. Latest odds and props on the Preakness, the 149th Preakness on Saturday.
You know what? We got to take a picture from the top because that structure is going to be gone soon, right? Like,
That's
so
correct.
we got to take a
One
couple
more
more
year.
pictures from up there, up
Yeah.
top. I always like watching the race where the old Pete Axthelm thing would be there. I mean, they used to have all these legendary people's names
Absolutely.
along
A
the
little
ledge
tape where you
there.
got to stand. Oh yeah. No, that it was it's a scene. Yeah, I'll miss it, but it's time.
All right, Preakness 149 is being run on Saturday. Bob Baffert will be here. McPeak's going to be here now that I know Dick Jerardi has his phone number and I can get him on the Jason Kelsey show. Can't get myself booked on the Jason Kelsey show, but I can get him booked on. Pac-Man scratch-offs on Friday afternoon. We're going to be down at Fadley's. Dick's not getting in here quick enough or early enough to get himself a Fadley's crab cake, but I love Dick enough that if he comes by, crab cakes for everybody on Friday. Luke and I will be getting ready for the Seattle Mariners game. I'm inviting Dave Sims. There's a good Philly guy for you. So maybe he'll
Oh,
come
Dave,
by on
awesome.
Friday as well because the Mariners are in town this weekend. Races in town. Mariners are in town this week. We've got the Orioles are in like all week long in first place. We have pitching, outfield, Stowers, all this stuff going on. And Luke and I will be monitoring all things NFL schedule as the Ravens begin the season in Kansas City against Patrick Mahomes. NFL is going to milk that on a Thursday night. I am Nestor. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We never stop talking. Baltimore, positive.